I am Chris.
And I'm Matt.
Welcome to Roleplay Chat.
We're two game masters who just can't stop talking about role-playing games.
And today we are behind the GM screen of the last Blood Betrayal Campaign diary, which is called A Daring Excursion.
It was a really fun game, and it was a really different game. Maybe you want to give our listeners a bit more context here for this, Chris.
Yeah, that game came up. I invited the two players that play Umgrim and Randall at my place, at my home, to do board games, actually. And we didn't really know what game we were going to play, but just talking, hanging out, they were like, oh man, I could really play a Blood Betrayal campaign game, like a role-playing game. And I'm like, my first instinct was like, I don't have anything prepared. I usually like really prepare a lot of things and like with text, and so I kind of felt out of my comfort zone. But I was like, you know what? I might have a little thing. Like I might have something that we could try, and we literally improvised a game. Like they didn't come to play that game, but we improvised it.
Yeah, and I remember you actually, at a later time, at a later date, you talked to me more about the letter that I have. Diedrich's letter that his master gave him, and how you had some ideas about different plot hooks that might exist. One of those plot hooks being the Stardust, spelled out in the letter, and how maybe there would be a quest related to that. But then you decided to scrap it altogether, and then how this kind of...
Well, actually, at this point, this was not known. I didn't said that. I didn't say that to the players or the characters.
Yeah.
And I remembered the two players that play the two characters, Umgrim and Randall, were talking. We're like, you know what, that Stardust thing. I feel like we should do. Like we could actually do that. So it really came from the desire of the players to go towards that. So once they said that, I'm like, I can run with that.
And I mean, you didn't really have very much prepared, right? You had, like...
No, I just knew that Stardust was mithril. Like it was the only thing. If it would be a quest, it would be that Stardust is an actual ore
stone.
Yeah. And it was gonna be mithril, and I like the idea of like the shining ceiling. That was the hook I had. Like, and that's usually how I start creating things. I have a hook. I have a cool scene or a cool thing. And that was the ceiling part for me.
But that's where it ended, really.
I just built, and then I built around it. But it was the first time I had to build around it live or like during the game. So I had my list of NPC names and I had my map, and I was like, okay, how can I
connect all the dots?
All the dots.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, looking back at it, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it does have a different feeling. Narratively, it feels a lot looser. It feels a lot less interconnected. In some of the other campaign diaries, all the elements when we're playing feel so interconnected. Whereas here, it looks to be a little bit more linear. You've got them on the going to Sock, going to see Beryl Bélanger, off to the mine, come back with the mithril. Like it feels a little bit more.
It feels more traditional, maybe like less dimensional and
almost fetch questy. For those of you who know what that is.
And it's hard to make a thing that has all these connection and betrayal or whatever during an improvised game.
Absolutely.
So I had to like deal with that. But yeah, it kind of comes out that way. Like you mentioned railroady, and I agree with you that it looks kind of railroady. But the fact is, it wasn't at all, because I did not know where they were going to go. Like they could have gone almost anywhere. Obviously, my info would maybe tend to show a little to go to the mine. But if they came up with something really different, they could have. And as you see in the Blood Betrayal, we mentioned this caravan with an aristocrat. This was what we call an interrupt. It was me not knowing what to do next and be like, oh, I have this. Again, like I always have like side quests or interrupts in my head that I can pull out at any moment, and it was me pulling this out, and they did not engage with it because I didn't want it to be railroady. I didn't want it to be all about that thing. But they didn't engage with it. So, and if they had, I don't think the game would have been as good, because they wouldn't have done
the thing they set out to do.
Yeah.
Really, yeah. And obviously with a character like Beroul Bélanger, a half dwarf with a top hat, a mouse, and a basically naked outfit, just a cooking apron or what have you.
It was more like a
Blacksmithing.
leather, like a blacksmithing apron. Yeah.
Yeah, like with something like that in the game, it immediately sets the tone to be a lot more lighthearted. Did you want to talk a little bit about, how it was different in that sense?
For me, this game was I challenged myself in different ways. One was improvise. I don't remember what part of that character was me, but I'm pretty sure I pulled a mat and I asked. I believe it was the players that play Randall. I asked him what's one thing he looks weird. What's the one thing he looks weird? And then there was a top hat with the mouse, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. And I remember there was a lot of sexual innuendo too around rocks and that we did put in the campaign diary, like it is. But so we laughed like a lot. I usually run a pretty serious game with, I want to say, dark theme, like something grim, which is pretty typical for a Warhammer game normally. But this was really lighthearted.
That's good. I mean, it's nice to change that pace a little bit. I know for me as a player playing in your campaign, near the end, I was starting to feel, like out of breath almost, because everything was just coming to an end, and it was like this climax of such intense moments. I can definitely see the value in having games peppered in like this, and I know that's kind of our plan moving forward, is to kind of take a little bit of a break from the intensity. It'd be kind of neat to see how much of the lessons learned in these improvised sessions that you had make their way into the campaign that we're going to be starting.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge for me, because I tend to go for that really grim, organized, with the big plot behind it. And to be honest, even now, we're gonna start playing again pretty soon, and I had all these different possible plots for each players, and I still find myself wanting a thread and some kind of, I don't know, like this grim challenge, if you want. But anyway, we're not going to go too much into details here, but it's more about, in the previous campaign, the Blood Betrayal, it was really crushing time all the time.
Right? Yeah. But so if there was an element of this improvised session that you think helped you grow as a game master, what would that be? What would be the lesson learned really to take out of
from challenging myself, I think the main thing was playing that improvised showed me that I can actually I can trust myself to come up with something. And I think that's something I would encourage anybody that finds themselves overly preparing or just sticking to notes. If you're running module, I think that might be problematic sometimes, because you always want to stick to the main material. And what I do now is I would read it, find the essence of it, the core, and the cool moments I like, and then don't look at the material, and just improvise using the ideas I was provided. And that's really, I think, that brought up my game mastering skills, the trust in myself. It lowered my prep time. It actually helped a lot.
That's really good to hear. I mean, I kind of find myself in the same situation most of the time. It's also my fun, and I think it is for you too. Preparing.
I still over prepared.
Coming with the sandbox that the players get to play in, the narrative and all that. But maybe that's not a conversation for here. What's something else we could talk about? I know that in one of our roleplay chat videos, maybe we'll link it here, when we talk about NPCs, we talk about this phenomena that happens where players tend to fixate on improvised NPCs because they're more open, they're a little bit more ridiculous, and who is a better example than a ridiculous NPC than our sky specialist, half dwarf. Yeah, that's
mouse hat, apron wearing dude. Yeah, I went weird.
Yeah, did that kind of solidify your opinion about how improvised NPCs can capture the
I think
attention?
my opinion kind of came from that, to be honest.
Okay.
Because it was one of the first time, because I over prepare, right? My NPCs were most of the time pretty deep and everything, so it
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
the first time I did that. And after that, that's when I came up. There's another character that's going to come up in the future that's called Bianca, and I prepared her in advance, but I was like, I need that factor of weird, quirky thing,
Okay.
um, even though it's prepared. And yeah, I really learned. And to me, it's a perfect example, as you said, of that situation. I was expecting the players to be like, "Oh, he's crazy. I'm not listening to him." But no, they come in, they eat pastries with him, they encourage him, they make a friend out of him, and they come
Yeah.
out the next day out of the house being like, "Yeah, we made a friend. It was great. We had a nice evening." And that's when I learned, okay, weird is appealing,
Mm-hmm.
and weird is a hook. So that's something to use, I think, for good and bad, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we talk a lot about it in that role play chat,
Hmm.
that long conversation. So I would encourage you to, take a look, see what you have to say, and even here, feel free to comment.
Hmm.
Do you have experience with odd, strange NPCs, and how do your players at the table interact with those NPCs? One other thing that maybe Chris we ought to
Hmm.
bring forward here is that this was a smaller game. You're playing just with two player characters.
Hmm.
In our video, our roleplay chat video about running one-on-one games, we give tips about tailoring the experience really to your players.
Hmm.
We'll link it up here, so I don't know which side it goes on, but we'll link it up. Is there anything that you wanted to kind of bring forward here with regards to that?
Yes, it obviously it's not a one-on-one, but I could actually tailor made to those two players.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was. I could actually direct when I would see them not getting bored, but getting less interested. I could like change it up. And when you have five players, usually somebody is interested, but with two players, it's really easy to like concentrate on what they actually like.
Mm-hmm.
And for Umgrim to go fight an impossible foe, that's like he loves it.
Yeah.
And it's Greenskin, which is kind of his favorite enemy, and he had to mine, which Umgrim had like blacksmithing background. It was made for Umgrim, and the player that plays Umgrim is takes a lot more spotlight than the player who plays Randall, and they're both like okay with that. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
just the way they are. And Randall was more like going throughout the wood, do the traveling thing. He could help there too. So it was kind of a mix of those two characters all mashed into one. So I could actually tailor made the game for them and have those different challenges of even sneaking is a bit like Randall has
Yeah.
some skills in that. So it really worked well. And my aristocrat caravan thing. If they wanted to play a diplomat and like talking game, I think it was obvious that
That they didn't. I
that
mean,
they didn't
yeah.
because they could have went to talk to that guy and go that route. But no, they decided exploration and
And
probably combat.
mm-hmm.
And I think it really represent well those two players. So it comes down to the tailoring the game to to the players and to the characters.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I guess that goes to show that the lessons that we learned in the one-on-one conversation in theory are applicable everywhere.
Another thing that I used that we talked about in the one-on-one is the fact that they have kind of a reveal. It wasn't really a reveal, but they did an objective that they come back to their group. So the next game when we're gonna start, their group is solving this letter,
Mm-hmm.
and they arrive with part of the solution. So I'm not giving the group the solution. The players worked for it, and they're like, "We have the Stardust," and we're just like, "What?"
Yeah,
Like,
that's neat.
so it was not a reveal in terms of information, but it was something they brought back to the group and made the story advance. Right. So again, it kind of links back to our one-on-one discussion.
Awesome. So I think that sums up everything that we have to talk about in this fun improvised mini session that you had with two of the players at the table.
Yep.
Uh, if you want to reach out to us, you can do so by contacting us on Twitter. That's roll_play_chat on Twitter.
Or by email, which it's contactroleplaychat@gmail.com.
If you want to hear more of our content, or if you enjoyed this, we'd encourage you to subscribe to our channel. Give us a like down below. It really helps us out a whole bunch. Or reach out to us on all the media platforms that we mentioned. On the two, I guess.
The two.
And then I think that covers everything we have for today, Chris.
That's all, Matt.
Let's call it a chat.